In the shadowy confines of Blackwood Pharmaceuticals laboratories, a mouse is taken out of its cage and beheaded. Claire needs the money, so she shows up at the company's ultra-modern facilities to take part in some clinical experiments for 5 days. Everyone is called to the exam room after changing into scrubs, where they find there is no Wi-Fi or reception. Claire tries to persuade her anxious mother to stop talking to her, but the message is not sent. It appears like they got into a quarrel of some kind. Afterwards, the team is introduced to Dr. Burke, who will oversee the trial. Participants won't be permitted to leave that floor for the duration of the 5 days, during which the drug dosage will begin slowly and increase daily. A nurse follows them into the bathroom to take samples there as well as for the remainder of the day, asking the same questions about any potential pain, obtaining blood samples, and monitoring their condition. Allison lashes out and yells at Claire when she wants to befriend her, only to stop herself when she feels like throwing up. Claire meets Amir in the restroom after throwing up and discovers he's a medical student hoping to work as an intern for the company in the future. Claire can't sleep that night because her brain keeps experiencing an odd chemical reaction. When she exits her room, she finds that everyone else is also having trouble falling asleep, which disturbs them. Marcus claims he is experiencing an inexplicable feeling. Burke informs them the following morning that a little sleeplessness is normal and that the battery of tests will begin anew. A clock on the wall indicates how many hours are left until the trial is over. Burke informs her bosses over the phone later at her office that the substance she is studying is seriously inflaming the participants' brains and entering their central nervous systems directly. The superiors inform her that since this is a double-blind trial, she is not permitted to know any further details. But when they learn that Burke sent them the test results in a single day, they are taken aback because it happened too quickly. Burke tells the group the following day that the trial's parameters have changed and that the firm now wants to know how long the group can remain awake. They are not allowed to attempt to fall asleep, and they have to let Burke or a nurse know if they are too exhausted. Claire experiences severe anxiety when placed in an MRI scanner after taking the new dosage since she is claustrophobic. The strange noises and shadows remind her horribly of her mom's inebriated reprimands and refusals to let her go. Claire is so terrified that she begs for the test to finish, yet it continues all the way through. The gang is increasingly worried as time goes on about their lack of sleep and the increasing dosage of medication. Burke tells them that they can quit at any time, but also says that everyone who remains until the very end would receive a bonus worth 30,000 euros. The group as a whole cheers and seems to like the idea, but Amir and Claire remain cautious since they think there will always be a catch. Allison persuades Claire to dance with her as the group celebrates by turning on music and sipping champagne. But Claire begins to yawn again, so she walks away to let Burke know. When Ray starts to yawn as well, Burke breaks up the festivities and tells everyone to get some water. Burke then makes another call to her supervisors, indicating that the participants' immune systems had malfunctioned. The higher-ups tell her to keep increasing the dose despite her request to halt the trial early. Claire begins to nod off, but the other participants are keeping each other awake by conversing. Allison breaks her out of her daze right away and asks her what she intends to do with the money. Claire is extremely contemptuous, which makes Allison feel bad, so she gets up and leaves the room. Amir exits too, feeling that the moment has been destroyed, and on the way out, he hears Burke tell her supervisors that she will not accept responsibility for whatever occurs next. Amir enters her office covertly after she leaves and examines the test findings on her computer, identifying the inflammation in her brain. Amir copies every file onto a flash drive, horrified. Rewind to the group watching TV when all of a sudden the screen starts to malfunction. When Claire goes to apologize to Allison for being alone while she's sitting, she finds that she's dozing off. Allison had a seizure at that point and begins to bleed from her ears, nose, and eyes. Her body collapses to the ground, her eyes becoming bloodshot as she throws up, and she passes away after trembling violently. Burke notices this, at which point the building's computer declares that there has been a security breach and that they are now in lockdown protocol. Burke and the participants quickly flee as the computer begins the countdown and an alarm goes off in every room, turning on the lights and making them red. Burke tries to pass the door even though it is already shutting, getting stuck and becoming seriously injured by the heavy metal. Although Burke apologizes and passes away as the door closes, trapping the participants within, the gang manages to take her out before it's too late. With a new tally of 24 hours remaining before the lockdown expires, the wall clock is reset. After leaving Burke's office, Amir orders everyone to stay up because they will all perish if they go to sleep. Amir says he witnessed the tests and that their minds had been working non-stop for the past 4 days, causing them to shut down. When the others attempt in vain to push the door, everyone becomes terrified, and Ray even becomes a little combative. A corporate message requesting patience is shown on the television in the recreation area. As they search about, they discover a large supply of smelling salts, so they are given 5 packets each, enough to last them the entire night. Ray uses one right away despite Amir's warning to use them sparingly. Ray then discovers some medication in a cabinet, but Amir forewarns them not to take it. Actually, Amir suggests against drinking coffee as well. Any stimulant will only increase the rate at which the metaphorical fires in their brains burn. They must wait for the doors to open in order to receive assistance, since Amir is certain that this is treatable. The gang makes a concerted effort to remain awake for the following several hours. They have now spent 100 hours awake. When Amir does a brain scan on Claire, he believes that the inflammation in her brain would decrease now that they are off the medication, but the results scare him, but he keeps it a secret from the others. Claire feels very lightheaded as she moves down the hallway and hears her mother's voice. Claire makes the decision to record a message for her mother, who is receiving palliative care in the hospital due to alcohol damage to her liver. Claire decides to remove the footage, though. After that, she discovers the mice in the lab and chooses to set them free, but they won't go. With 16 hours remaining, the group begins to experience sleeplessness. Ray gives himself a cheek smack to wake up as he's already depleted of all his salts. He soon starts pestering the others to share their salts, but no one is willing to assist him. Burke abruptly sits up behind Amir as he is still conducting tests in the exam room with the 2 bodies. But when Amir looks back, she's still dead, indicating that he's beginning to have hallucinations. Claire remains in the recreation area, staring at the wall while she hears her mother's voice. She is overcome with darkness as she is reminded of her eerie childhood chamber, but Marcus stops her before she can give in. Marcus shows Claire the scar on his leg from a major hiking accident because he knows Claire can't appreciate how well he's doing and that the body will always persevere when it needs to survive. After that, Claire visits Burke's office and reviews her patient file after examining the brain scans. She finds notes discussing her destructive conduct and dejection, which made her an ideal target for high-risk experiments. Later, Vanessa is discovered by Claire using fire to stay awake and claiming she isn't going to give up. Marcus is whistling in the restroom when he hears someone else whistle back, even though he should be alone. After that, he switches on the faucet and finds that the water falls silently. He doesn't hear the delayed noise until he switches it off. The same thing occurs when he bangs on the mirror. A few seconds later, there is a sound. Marcus hears the whistling in the hallways and turns away from the restroom out of fear. When he finally arrives at the front hall, he is startled to see the door opening after starting to look about without seeing anyone. Marcus enters the deep darkness beyond the door and, moments later, the others discover him dead on the floor, having fallen asleep due to the hallucination. Everybody fears because there are 15 hours left. Claire stumbles out of the gathering as she feels lightheaded and sees Allison opening her eyes. She makes it to the kitchen, where she uses fire to reanimate her body in response to seeing a mouse staring at her. Although Claire has a terrible burn scar as a result, she is now conscious and awake. She finds the others and yells at them, telling them she's sick of waiting and that she find a way out after bandaging her hand. The gang draws a map of the building to determine which wall they must breach in order to escape. Amir explains that it won't work because buildings like this one are designed with strict security, but the others choose to ignore him and begin pounding an axe into the wall. They work quickly by taking turns, and gradually the hole gets large enough to locate the end. Regretfully, Amir was correct. A metal barrier just as thick as the door protects the wall. Claire finds Amir while he is giving her a letter with a confession, while having hallucinations of Burke's dead face. It turns out that it was his copying the files that triggered the lockdown, and now he feels so guilty that he decides to fall asleep. Claire stops him immediately and keeps throwing fire metaphors to understand what they can do with their brains. Ray begins to wonder how Amir knew about the metal wall and concludes he must be secretly working for the company. This offers Amir an idea. By employing some medications as poison, he can produce an effect that would typically result in brain death, but since they are experiencing these side effects, their death should be prevented. Amir ignores the hallucinations and gets to work on the mix right away. While running to notify the others, Claire runs across Paul, who advises her not to put her trust in Amir. He says he went through Amir's belongings and discovered the empty stimulant bottle he had instructed them not to take. The power goes out at that point, so they have to wander about with the torches on their phones. Before turning around to find a dead Allison standing in front of her, Claire starts hearing her mother's and Allison's voices and begins to have a breakdown. She screams, drops her phone, and the light goes out, so she tries using a lighter instead, which causes her to see more dead faces in the dark. When she eventually finds the electricity box and can restart the power, the hallucinations stop, and she finds Paul on the ground, waking him up before he could die. Subsequently, the group confronts Amir, questioning him about the stimulants and the power box. Amir protests that he didn't tamper with the electricity and that he poured them out for safety, but Ray hits him and binds him up with Paul's assistance. Claire's worries are disregarded by Vanessa, Ray, and Paul, who are certain that Amir is concealing something and have resolved to use any measures necessary to force him to confess. Claire interrupts Ray before he can hurt Amir with a knife to get him to talk by revealing that Amir has been working on a cure. Claire offers to be the first test subject after Ray claims that Amir's intention is to murder them. This way, they can determine whether or not the method is safe. However, the group still won't let Amir go, so he provides them directions on how to combine the medication. Vanessa confides in Ray in private while Paul is at work, revealing that she witnessed him trip the fuse. After Ray acknowledges that he was attempting to lull Amir to sleep in order to show that he was lying, Vanessa divulges one more secret. She has discovered a sedative they can employ. Paul is now done blending the remedy and preparing the injection. Vanessa walks over to give Amir the sedative while everyone is preoccupied, but she collapses to the ground. Vanessa observes the others running to her body while having an out-of-body experience, but soon she is surrounded by smoke and darkness. Vanessa screams as her real body begins to bleed and has a seizure when she sees the devil come before her. Paul scurries to get the treatment, but Vanessa's trembling breaks the needle and knocks it away. She then throws up and eventually passes away. To exacerbate the situation, Paul moves quickly enough to knock the jar containing the remaining cure off the table, shattering it as well. When Amir begins to chuckle uncontrollably, Claire loses it and threatens him with a knife. She leaves the room to check the time, realizing she's losing it, but her hazy eyesight shows good night instead of numbers. Then, as she hears her mother's voice once more, she turns to stare at the wall and her mind becomes completely dark. Claire, who is feeling lightheaded, finds her final packet of salt and uses her phone to record a message for her mother. However, she trips and falls, dropping the packet. Claire resists the delusions and swims in the air to reach the packet, eventually ingesting the salts to wake up, but her body floats aloft as beautiful music begins to play. She taps on the wall of the rec room after hearing a disturbance and finding it to be hollow. She discovers a hidden autopsy chamber after tearing down the wallpaper with Paul's assistance. Finally, they can go thanks to a door at the back that leads to a hallway and an elevator. Claire wishes to inform the others, but Paul advises them to keep their distance. Amir continues to meet Burke in the meantime, who tells him to defend himself and notes that Claire left the knife close by. After bidding farewell to Vanessa's body in the bedroom, Ray discovers Amir's note in her pocket. Ray is furious and rushes in search of Amir, who starts screaming for assistance right away. Paul is forced to accompany Claire as she runs away after hearing him. Ray takes out a scalpel in the lab and prepares to exact revenge on Amir after the latter pushes against the cloth on Ray's wrists and breaks them. He lunges at Ray and stabs him with the scalpel, but eventually the illness causes him to lose consciousness. At that point, he takes the knife and stabs Ray repeatedly until he dies. Claire and Paul show there at that point and attempt to soothe him, but Burke's delusions force Amir to complete the task. Paul hides in the rec room and locks the door behind him as the two flee right away. Claire is now forced to continually sprinting into the MRI room, where Amir catches up with her, flips her over, and unintentionally activates the machine. The MRI machine's magnets prevent Amir from stabbing Claire when he is about to, so Claire kicks him and flees. In the meantime, Paul arrives at the elevator and turns it on, but regrettably, this is an incinerator rather than an elevator. Paul is killed by massive flames that emerge from the walls shortly after. Returning to Claire, she locates some scissors and prepares to defend herself as Amir fetches his knife and pursues her. Just as they both prepare to nod off, the computer abruptly signals that the lockdown is over and the clock reaches 0. When the lights come back on, the door opens to let in a few armed guys, who promptly murdered Amir. When Claire hears the gunshot, she runs to hide while the men look across the floor for all the bodies. Claire hurriedly covers her face with Amir's blood and enters a bag to appear to be dead after seeing that the bodies are in bags as she tries to go and discovers that everything is safe. She is tossed in the back of a vehicle with the others after a man checks on her and thinks his colleague found the body. Closing her eyes, Claire hums her mother's song while using the flashlight on her phone to see through her persistent hallucinations that a dead Allison is in the bag with her. A friendlier Allison gives her a little smile before vanishing from view when she opens her eyes once more. When the truck gets far enough away from the plant, Claire emerges from the bag and the drivers are so shocked to see her in the mirror that the car crashes. Claire notices that both guys are unconscious and gets out of the truck right away, but she can barely walk a few steps before passing out. Claire is still unconscious in the hospital for months later. A news broadcast declares that Burke was held accountable for the incident and that Blackwood Pharmaceuticals was found not guilty of any wrongdoing. Claire opens her eyes at that very time. To ensure you never miss any updates on new videos, kindly click the bell icon, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.